I am standing in front of the door to my son's house, my hands frozen around my car keys, and I can hear every word coming from that living room. The voice of Chloe, my daughter-in-law, cuts through the wood like a knife. I hope the old lady spins out on a curve in this storm. That way the beach house is left to us and we don't have to wait anymore. And then I hear Lucas's laugh. My son, my only son. Laughing at the possibility of me dying tonight. I feel the air escaping from my lungs. But I do not make a sound. I do not ring the doorbell. I do not scream. I simply take a step back, then another, and another, until my feet find the path back to the car. The gifts remain in the back seat. $80,000 in stock options from my companies, wrapped in gold paper that now seems obscene to me. The storm continues to roar outside, but I no longer care. I drive the 6 hours back, crying in silence, while the windshield wipers fight against the rain. And I promise myself something in that moment. 1 month later, not a trace of their perfect life will remain. My name is Eleanor. I am 63 years old. I own 3 textile import companies that I founded from scratch 35 years ago. Every morning I wake up at 5:30, make coffee in the Italian press I bought in Milan 15 years ago, and sit on the terrace of my house to watch the sunrise over the ocean. I have lived alone for 8 years. Since I was widowed. My husband died of a massive heart attack one Sunday afternoon while he was watering the plants in the garden. He fell among the white hydrangeas he loved so much. There was no time for goodbyes. There were no last words. Just the brutal silence of a heart that stopped beating. Lucas was 27 years old then. He cried at the funeral, but 3 months later he was already asking me when I was going to sell the house, how much his father had left. If the companies were now solely mine, I justified it. I thought it was grief. I thought it was his way of processing the loss. How stupid I was. But my history with abandonment started much earlier. When I was 12 years old, my mother left home without explanation. She left a note on the kitchen table that said, "I can't take it anymore." That was all. My father became a silent man who drank whiskey every night in front of a turned-off television. I learned to cook, to clean, to survive. I learned that people leave. I learned that you cannot trust anyone to stay. And I learned, above all, not to need anyone. That is why I built my own empire. That is why I became someone who would never depend on anyone else. But with Lucas, it was different. He was my son, my blood. I thought that meant something. I thought a mother's love was unbreakable, even when it came from only one side. The first few years were perfect. Lucas was a sweet, affectionate boy who hugged me before sleeping and told me I was the best mom in the world. His father adored him. They played football on Saturday mornings. They built things together in the garage. We were a real family. Oh, that is what I believed. After Robert's death, everything changed slowly, like when a plant withers without you noticing, until it is already too late. Lucas started to distance himself. He canceled dinners. He did not answer calls. He always had excuses. I told myself it was normal, that he was a grown man building his own life. But deep down, a part of me knew something was broken. And still, I kept giving. I kept being the mother who solves everything, who pays for everything, who forgives everything. He met Chloe 4 years ago at a business conference. She worked in the hotel's events department. She was pretty, self-assured, with that smile that seems genuine until you learn to see what is behind it. The first time I saw her, something in my stomach twisted. An intuition, but I ignored it. Lucas seemed happy. He seemed in love. And I just wanted to see him happy. At the introductory dinner, Chloe asked me about my companies with an interest that seemed flattering to me. She wanted to know how I had started, how many employees I had, if I owned properties. I answered with pride, believing I finally had a daughter-in-law who valued hard work. How naive. How terribly naive. The wedding was intimate, at the beach house I own on the coast. Chloe insisted it be there. She said it was the most beautiful place she had seen in her life, that she dreamed of getting married in front of the ocean. I paid for everything, of course. The catering, the flowers, the photographer, the music. $22,000 in total. Lucas did not even thank me. Chloe did, but now I remember how her eyes scanned every corner of that house, as if she were calculating its value. After the wedding, the frequent visits began, always with some excuse. They wanted to spend the weekend. They needed to rest from the stress of the city. They missed the sound of the waves. I felt happy to have them close. I prepared their favorite meals, washed their sheets, made sure they had everything they needed. I became the hostess of my own home, and they became the permanent guests who never quite left. Then the favors started, small ones at first. Chloe asked me to lend her money for a digital marketing course, $3,000 that she never paid back. Lucas needed help with the down payment on a new car because his had broken down, $8,000 that he would pay me back as soon as he closed a deal. The deal never closed. Then it was the apartment. They lived in a modest place downtown, but Chloe complained constantly about the noise, the neighbors, that there wasn't enough space. One day, during a meal at my house, she dropped the comment casually. "Eleanor, I saw a beautiful apartment in the residential district. It is perfect for us, but the rent is a little high. $15,000 a year. If only we could afford it." She looked at me with those abandoned puppy eyes, and I, like the fool I was, said yes, that I would pay the rent for the first year, just to help them get settled. 1 year turned into 2, then into 3. Every time I mentioned that perhaps it was time for them to take charge, Lucas told me he was going through a tough time at work, that he just needed a few more months, and I caved. I always caved. Chloe's mother appeared on the scene in the second year of the marriage. Sandra, a 50-year-old woman, with a smile as fake as a $3 bill. She arrived with 2 suitcases and the promise of staying only a few weeks while she found a job in the city. The weeks turned into months. She lived in my beach house without paying anything, ate from my refrigerator, used my utilities, and every time I visited, I found the house a mess. Damp towels on the sofa, dirty dishes in the sink, empty wine bottles on the terrace. When I gently mentioned to Chloe that perhaps her mother could help with the cleaning, she looked at me as if I had insulted her. "Eleanor, my mom is going through a hard time. She just got divorced. She needs support, not criticism." And I, once again, shut up. I swallowed my discomfort and let a stranger take over the space I had built with my own hands. But what really should have alerted me were the questions. Chloe started asking them more frequently, always with that casual tone that pretended to be innocent. "Eleanor, is the beach house in your name? Or was it also in Robert's name? Do you have a will? It's important. You know, at your age, one never knows. Are the companies registered only under your name, or does Lucas have a share?" I answered with honesty, without thinking that every word was information she was filing away, cataloging, turning into a strategy. One day, while we were drinking coffee on my terrace, she brought up the subject of beneficiaries. "It's just that a friend of mine just lost her mother, and it turned out she didn't have anyone designated as a beneficiary on her bank accounts. It was legal chaos. You must have all that in order, right?" She talked to me about trusts, about inheritances, about how it was easier if everything was well structured. She even recommended a lawyer to me, a friend of a friend who could help me organize my affairs. I declined politely, telling her I already had Arthur, my trusted lawyer, for 20 years. I saw a flash of irritation in her eyes, but she recovered quickly with a smile. The months passed, and I kept giving. I paid for the repair of Lucas's car when it broke down. $5,000. I funded an anniversary trip for them to Cancun because they deserved it after so much stress. $7,000. When Chloe wanted to remodel the kitchen of the apartment I paid for, I agreed to cover the expenses. $12,000 in new cabinets, stainless steel appliances, and a granite island she had seen in a magazine. Every time I signed a check, I felt a small twinge of discomfort, but I stifled it with justifications. They were my family. Lucas was my only son. This was what mothers did, right? They cared, provided, sacrificed. And if sometimes I felt more like an ATM than a mother, well, maybe that was just my insecurity talking. The true moment of alarm arrived 6 months ago. We were dining at an elegant restaurant downtown, celebrating Lucas's birthday, 35 years old. I had reserved the table weeks in advance, had chosen the wine he liked, had brought an expensive gift, a Swiss watch I had seen him admiring in a store months ago. $4,000. During dinner, Chloe mentioned casually that they had been looking at houses to buy. It's time to have something of our own, you know? We can't rent forever. Lucas nodded, looking at me with expectation. Then she continued. We saw a lovely one on the north side. 4 bedrooms. Big garden. Close to good schools for when we have kids. It costs $350,000. We thought maybe you could help us with the down payment. Only $100,000. We could pay you back little by little. She said it as if she were asking me to pass the salt. Lucas didn't even look me in the eye. He kept cutting his steak as if the conversation were about the weather. Something inside me resisted for the first time in years. $100,000 is a lot of money, I said softly. Chloe laughed. That type of laugh that sounds joyful but has sharp edges. Eleanor, for you it's nothing. You have 3 successful companies, properties, investments. You're rich. And Lucas is your only son. Someday all of that will be his anyway, right? Why not help him now when he really needs it? The logic was impeccable, but something in my stomach turned. I didn't say yes that night. I told them I would think about it, that I needed to review my finances. I saw Chloe's smile freeze slightly, saw her exchange a look with Lucas. But they didn't insist. Not yet. They knew how to wait. They knew that eventually I would cave, as I always had. The following weeks were strange. Lucas called me more often than usual, but the conversations felt forced, as if he were following a script. He asked about my health, if I felt well, if I had gone to the doctor recently. It's just that you're at an age where you have to take care of yourself, Mom, he said with a concern that sounded rehearsed. Chloe started sending me articles about estate planning, about the importance of having all documents in order. One day I received an email from her with the subject line, "For your peace of mind." Inside were links to lawyer services specializing in wills and trusts. The message said, Eleanor, I know it's an uncomfortable topic, but it is important. Lucas and I want to make sure you are protected and that your wishes are respected when, well, you know, it's for your own good. I read that email 3 times, trying to find genuine concern between the lines. I didn't find it. I only saw calculation. It was then that I decided to do something I had never done before. Observe. Really observe. Instead of accepting every word, every gesture, every request at face value, I started paying attention to the details I had been ignoring for years. And what I saw chilled my blood. During a visit to my beach house, I found Chloe taking photographs of every room with her phone. When I asked her what she was doing, she told me she wanted to capture the beauty of the place to show it to some friends. But I had seen the angle of her shots. They weren't aesthetic photos. They were inventory photos. She was taking images of the paintings on the walls, of the antique furniture, of the porcelain dinnerware I had inherited from my grandmother. She was cataloging my possessions as if they were already hers. That night, while she and Lucas slept in the guest room, I quietly entered the living room and checked her phone, which she had left charging on the table. I know, it was an invasion of privacy, but something was screaming at me to do it. I found a folder titled Beach House E. Inside were more than 200 photographs, every corner, every object of value, every architectural detail, and worst of all, there were notes. Notes about the estimated value of the furniture, about how much the property might be worth in the current market, about which things could be sold immediately and which should be kept. My heart beat so hard I thought it was going to give me away. I put the phone back exactly where it was and returned to my room. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of the waves, asking myself when exactly my son had stopped seeing me as his mother and had started seeing me as his future inheritance. I remembered every birthday, every Christmas, every hug that now felt contaminated with a hidden agenda. How many of his smiles had been genuine? How many times had he told me I love you while mentally calculating how much longer he would have to wait? Nausea rose up my throat. I got up, went to the bathroom, and threw up. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a 63-year-old woman who had been so stupid, so desperately in need of love, that she had allowed herself to be used as a walking bank. But I said nothing. Not yet. A part of me wanted to be wrong. I wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation, that my paranoia was playing a dirty trick on me. So I went on with my life, but now with my eyes wide open, and the signs kept appearing, one after another, like pieces of a macabre puzzle. Lucas mentioned casually during a phone call that he had been researching estate taxes. It's brutal, Mom. They take almost half of everything if you don't structure it well. You should talk to a specialist. Chloe started asking me about my life insurance policies. Do you have insurance? How much? It's important to know, Eleanor, just in case something happens to you, we need to know what steps to follow. Every question was a small stab, a reminder that to them, I was worth more dead than alive. One Sunday afternoon, while we were eating at my house, Sandra, Chloe's mother, who was still living rent-free on my beach property, made a comment that left me paralyzed. We were talking about an acquaintance who had recently passed away, and she said, "Poor woman, but at least her children were left well off. She left them 2 houses and a good amount of money. That really is being a good mother, making sure your children don't suffer after you're gone." She looked directly at me while she said it, with a smile that pretended to be warm, but that I could now see for what it really was, a veiled pressure. Lucas nodded enthusiastically. It's true. It's the most important thing, leaving everything well arranged for the family. Chloe touched my hand, squeezing it gently. You are a good mother, Eleanor. I know that when the time comes, you will have thought of Lucas. He is your only son. After all, everything you have built should be for him. I felt the room shrinking, the air becoming dense. I excused myself, saying I had a headache, and went to my room. I heard them laughing downstairs, heard the clinking of wine glasses I had paid for, in the house I had bought, eating the food I had prepared. It was in that moment that I made a decision. I called Arthur, my lawyer, and asked him to come to my house the next day. When he arrived, I told him everything. The constant questions, the photographs, the comments about inheritances and wills, the subtle but constant pressure. Arthur listened to me with a serious expression, taking occasional notes. When I finished, he took off his glasses and looked at me with a mixture of compassion and concern. Eleanor, what you are describing to me sounds like a very calculated strategy. I have seen cases like this before. People who get close to older individuals with resources, earning their trust, making themselves indispensable, while waiting for the opportune moment. I asked him what I should do. For now, nothing drastic. But we need to protect your assets. We are going to review your will. We are going to create legal structures that prevent anyone from manipulating or pressuring you. And above all, do not sign anything. Do not make promises. Do not transfer properties without consulting me first. I nodded, feeling for the first time in months that I was regaining some control. Weeks passed, and I continued acting normally, but every interaction with Lucas and Chloe was now an acting exercise. I smiled when they smiled. I nodded when they talked about their future plans. I avoided any conversation about money or properties, but inside, something had broken irreparably. I looked at my son, and I no longer saw the boy I had raised, the young man I had hugged when his father died. I saw a stranger who had learned to manipulate my love, to use my need for family as a weapon against me, and it hurt. It hurt more than anything I had felt before, more than my husband's death, more than my mother's abandonment, because this was a chosen, calculated betrayal, sustained over years. Then the invitation arrived. Lucas called me one Wednesday afternoon with that cheerful voice I now recognized as fake. "Mom, we're going to have a little celebration this Saturday for my birthday. Nothing big, just Chloe, her family, and me. We thought it would be nice if you came. It's been a while since we spent time together." My birthday had been the previous month. He had forgotten it. Not a call, not a message. But I had to be present at his. Of course. I told him I would go, that I would love to celebrate with them. Perfect. "Mom, we expect you at 7. And don't bring anything, okay? Your presence is enough." That last sentence made me want to laugh. My presence had never been enough. What they wanted was my money, my properties, my timely death. But I decided I would bring something special. I spent the following days preparing everything with Arthur. $80,000 in stocks from my companies. Papers that looked official, documents that in reality transferred nothing but looked impressive. I wrapped them carefully in gold paper, with a huge silver bow. They looked like the gift of someone who had finally caved, who had decided to start distributing her fortune while alive. It was the perfect bait. The day of the celebration dawned gray, with dark clouds threatening a storm. At 3 in the afternoon, it started to rain. At 4, the rain had turned into a deluge. The forecast said it was the strongest storm of the season. Perfect, I thought. Absolutely perfect. I dressed with care, chose a cream-colored sweater and dark trousers, pulled back my hair. I looked in the mirror and practiced my smile. The smile of the foolish mother who suspects nothing. It came out perfect. I got into the car with the gifts in the back seat and started the trip, 6 hours away in normal conditions. With that storm, it would probably be 7 or 8. But I didn't care. I had to do this. I had to know with certainty if everything I suspected was true, or if my mind was betraying me. I drove slowly, carefully, while the rain hit the windshield with an almost supernatural fury. Thunder rumbled over my head. Several cars were stopped on the shoulder, with hazard lights on, waiting for the worst of the storm to pass. But I kept going, mile after mile, hour after hour, with my hands gripping the steering wheel and my heart beating in my ears. I arrived at 9 at night, 2 hours late. The storm hadn't let up a bit. The streets were flooded, the trees were bending dangerously with the wind, and I was soaked just from the walk between the parking lot and the building entrance. I climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor where they lived, carrying the wrapped gifts that now weighed like stones in my arms. Every step brought me closer to a truth that part of me still didn't want to face. When I arrived in front of their door, I heard voices inside, laughter, soft music in the background. I raised my hand to ring the doorbell, but something stopped me. The door was ajar, barely a few inches, as if someone had gone out to take out the trash and had forgotten to close it properly. And through that narrow crack, I heard Chloe's voice with a clarity that froze me to the bone. Seriously, I hope the old lady spins out on a curve in this storm. It would be the best thing that could happen to us. There was a brief silence, and then another voice, Sandra's, her mother. Chloe, don't say those things. But she said it laughing, without a hint of real reproach. Then I heard Lucas. My son, my only son. Mom is right. Babe, you can't say that. And for a second, a very brief second, my heart wanted to believe he was defending me. But then he continued, you have to be more discreet. But yeah, it would be convenient. That way the beach house is left to us, without having to wait who knows how many more years. The old lady is healthy. She could live another 20 years. And I don't plan to wait until I'm 50 to start enjoying what belongs to me. Laughter. Genuine, joyful, conspiratorial laughter, as if they had just shared a private joke. Chloe continued, and her voice had that conspiratorial tone people use when they think no one else is listening. Yesterday I was calculating. Just the beach house is worth like $1,200,000. The 3 companies, if we sell them well, can give us another $3 million easily. The investment properties she has, another $800,000. We are talking about more than $5 million. Lucas, $5 million. And she has them there, hoarded away, being a cheapskate who makes us beg for every dollar. I heard the sound of a glass clinking against another. A toast to the inheritance that is coming, said Sandra. To Eleanor and her posthumous generosity, added Lucas, and the 3 voices joined in a guffaw that went through me like a rusty knife. But they hadn't finished. Chloe kept talking, and every word was worse than the last. The best thing is that the idiot thinks we love her. You should have seen her face when I asked her to pay for the kitchen remodel. She was so happy to be able to help, so grateful that we included her in our lives. It's pathetic. A rich and lonely old woman who buys love because nobody wants her for who she is. Lucas laughed. She's always been like that. Since Dad died, she became desperate. She called me every day at the beginning, asking if I was okay, if I needed anything. It was suffocating. But you taught me to use that to our favor, babe, to make her need work for us. Of course, responded Chloe with pride. Loneliness is a powerful tool, and she is so lonely, so in need of feeling important in someone's life, that she would do anything to keep our attention. Sandra intervened then. And what happens if she realizes? If she starts to suspect? There was a pause, and then Lucas spoke with an assurance that destroyed me. She's not going to realize. She's too dumb, too emotional. Besides, I already made her believe I'm interested in the companies, that I want to learn the business to eventually run it. She swallowed that lie whole. She thinks I'm finally maturing, that I'm getting interested in her legacy. She doesn't know that the only thing I'm interested in is selling everything as soon as I sign the transfer papers, Chloe added. And the will thing is almost ready. I've been pressuring her subtly. 2 weeks ago, I mentioned the lawyer I know again, the one who could help her organize everything. This time she seemed more receptive. I think she's going to cave soon. Perfect, said Lucas. The faster we have everything in legal order, the better. Because honestly, I'm tired of pretending I care. I'm tired of the boring dinners, of listening to her repetitive stories, of having to act like the devoted son. When all this is over, I'm going to block her number and I'm never going to have to see her again. The world stopped. The sound of the rain disappeared. The thunder rumbling outside turned into silence. I could only hear the beating of my own heart, slow and heavy, as if every beat cost me a monumental effort. My hands started to tremble. The gifts slipped from my arms and fell to the floor with a dull thud, but inside no one seemed to hear it over the music and their own voices. I stood there, in front of that ajar door, unable to move, unable to fully process what I had just heard. This wasn't a suspicion. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. It was worse than I had imagined. They didn't just want my money. They hated me. They despised me. They had turned my love into a game, my need for family into a business strategy. Sandra spoke again. And what about the keys to the beach house? You already have copies. Yes, answered Chloe. I made copies months ago. When she dies, we can enter immediately and take out everything of value before the legal proceedings start. The paintings, the jewelry she keeps in that ridiculous safe she thinks nobody knows exists. Everything. Do you know the combination? Asked Lucas. Not yet, but I'm going to get it. I've seen her type it twice. It's just a matter of paying attention. Laughter again. Laughter celebrating my future death, planning the looting of my life as if it were war booty. The only thing that makes me angry, said Lucas, is that we can't speed up the process. We have to wait for nature to take its course. Well, said Chloe with a playful tone, there are ways to help nature. Stress, for example. If we pressure her enough, if we keep her anxious and worried, her health could deteriorate faster. Diabolical, said Lucas, but he sounded pleased. That's why I love you. I don't remember making the conscious decision to move. My legs simply started to back up, one step, then another. Moving away from that door, from those voices, from that reality that had just destroyed what was left of my heart. I went down the stairs as if in a trance, left the building, crossed the parking lot under the torrential rain. The water soaked me completely, but I didn't feel it. I felt nothing except a huge, black void extending inside me like a bottomless abyss. I arrived at the car, sat in the driver's seat, and stayed there, watching the rain hit the windshield. The gifts were still in the back seat. $80,000 in decorative papers that were going to serve a completely different purpose now. I turned the key, started the engine, and began the trip back. 6 hours again, 6 hours driving in the middle of the worst storm of the year. But I no longer cared if I went off the curve, if the car skidded, if a tree fell on the road. Part of me wished something like that would happen. It would be easier than facing the rest of my life, knowing what I now knew. But I survived. I arrived home at 4 a.m, completely exhausted, soaked to the bone, shivering not only from cold but from something much deeper. I took off my wet clothes, got into the shower, and let the hot water run over me while I cried. I cried for the son I had lost, or perhaps for the son I had never really had. I cried for the wasted years, for the money given away, for the love given without being reciprocated. I cried for the foolish woman I had been, who had confused manipulation with affection, who had been so desperate not to be alone that she had allowed herself to be used in the vilest way. When I got out of the shower, I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red, swollen. I was 63 years old, and I looked 80. But there was something different in my gaze. Something hard, something cold, something that hadn't been there before. I dried my hair, put on my pajamas, and instead of going to sleep, I went down to my office. It was 5 a.m. on a Sunday, but sleep was the last thing on my mind. I turned on the computer and started doing something I should have done years ago. Reviewing every transaction, every payment, every gift, every loan I had given to Lucas and Chloe since they met. I opened spreadsheets, reviewed bank statements, searched for receipts, and with every number I added, with every amount I recorded, I felt rage replacing the pain. $45,000 in rent paid over 3 years, $8,000 for the car, $12,000 for the kitchen, $22,000 for the wedding, $3,000 for Chloe's course, $7,000 for the Cancun trip, $5,000 in car repairs, $4,000 for the watch, $3,500 in dinners and minor gifts, $1,200 in utilities for the beach house that Sandra consumed, another $15,000 in small loans that were never paid back. In total, $127,500 in 4 years, more than $30,000 a year, and that without counting the value of the use of my property, maintenance expenses, utilities, food. If I added everything, I had easily spent more than $150,000 on them. I printed every document, every record, every proof. I organized them in a thick manila folder that I placed in the center of my desk. Then I opened my personal notebook, the one where I write my important thoughts, and started making a list. Not an emotional list, not a venting of hurt feelings, a practical, cold, strategic list. A list of every single thing I needed to cancel, every tie I needed to cut, every door I needed to close. I wrote with clear and firm handwriting, without any doubt, without any tremor in my hand. Number 1. Cancel apartment rent payment, effective immediately. Number 2. Remove Lucas as beneficiary from my bank accounts and insurance policies. Number 3. Remove Lucas from any position in my companies, including the consulting position I had given him 6 months ago. Number 4. Change all the locks on the beach house. Number 5. Evict Sandra from my property via legal notice. Number 6. Cancel all additional credit cards I had given to Lucas. Number 7. Transfer the beach house to an irrevocable trust that not even I could undo. Number 8. Modify my will, removing Lucas as principal heir and distributing my assets in a way that left him with the legal minimum. The list kept growing. Every point was a concrete, measurable, irreversible action. There was no room for emotion. There was no room for regret. This was a surgical procedure. I was cutting the cancer out of my life with clinical precision. When I finished, it was 7 in the morning. I made coffee, sat on the terrace, despite the chill the storm had left, and waited for it to be 8 o'clock to call Arthur. I knew he checked emails on Sunday mornings. I sent him a message. Emergency. Need to see you today. Urgent, he replied in 10 minutes. I'm coming over at 10. Those 2 hours of waiting were the longest of my life. I reviewed my list again and again, verifying that nothing was missing, that I hadn't left any door open through which they could continue entering my life. My phone rang 3 times. All 3 times it was Lucas. I didn't answer. He left voicemails. I listened to them on speakerphone, with a cup of coffee in my hand, studying every word like a scientist studies a specimen. Mom, where are you? We expected you last night. Chloe made your favorite dessert. We're calling your house and you're not answering. We're worried. The lie was so obvious now that it made me want to laugh. The second message, half an hour later. Mom, seriously, pick up. We're worried you might have driven in that storm. Please, tell us you're okay. The third one, an hour later, and now there was a note of irritation in his voice. Mom, this isn't funny anymore. Answer the phone. I don't know what game you're playing, but I need to know you're okay. Game. What an interesting word. For 4 years, they had played with me, and I didn't even know we were playing. Now I had finally learned the rules, and I was about to flip the board completely. Arthur arrived promptly at 10. I let him in, poured him coffee, and told him everything. Every word I had heard in front of that door, every macabre plan they had discussed, every slight, every calculation, every anticipated celebration of my death. I spoke for 40 minutes without stopping, with a steady voice, without crying. Arthur listened without interrupting, his expression becoming increasingly serious. When I finished, he remained silent for a few seconds, processing. Then he spoke. Eleanor, this is serious, not just morally, but legally. What you describe could constitute undue influence, and if they had succeeded in getting you to change your will under pressure, we could have argued coercion. But the most important thing now is to protect you. I nodded. That's why I called you. I need to execute this list. I passed him the notebook. He read it carefully, nodding at every point. We can do all this, he said finally. But we need to be strategic. If we act too fast, they might get scared and try some desperate move. If we act too slow, we give them time to plan a response. I propose the following. Today we draft the new documents. Tomorrow, first thing in the morning, I personally take care of the legal notices. We cancel the payments so that they become effective at the end of this month, in 3 days. That gives them enough time to realize something changed, but not enough to react effectively. And the locks? I asked. A locksmith can go tomorrow to the beach house. I also suggest you install security cameras, because if Chloe has copies of the keys, she might try to enter before realizing they no longer work. I nodded. All of this made sense. It was logical, rational, perfect. We worked for hours. Arthur had his laptop, and I had access to all my financial and legal documents. We drafted a new will where Lucas received exactly what the law obligated, the minimum, which in our state was a nominal amount to prevent contestation. The rest I divided among charities that helped older women who were victims of financial abuse. The irony didn't escape me. We created an irrevocable trust for the beach house, naming those same organizations as beneficiaries. I signed authorizations to cancel all services and automatic payments related to Lucas. We drafted a formal letter removing him from any position in my companies. We prepared an eviction notice for Sandra, giving her 30 days to abandon the property, which was more than the law required, but which Arthur insisted was prudent to avoid legal problems. When we finished, it was 4 p.m. I had signed more documents that day than in the entire previous year. But every signature felt like recovering a piece of myself. There is something else, said Arthur before leaving. You need to prepare yourself emotionally for what is coming. When they realize what you have done, they are going to react. They will probably try to manipulate you again. They are going to cry. They are going to beg. They are going to play the victim. Lucas is going to say, you are a bad mother, that you are abandoning them, asking how you can do this to them. Chloe will probably try a different approach, perhaps veiled threats, perhaps dramatic pleas. You have to be prepared to stand firm. You can do it. I looked him in the eyes. This man had known me for 20 years. He had handled my divorce when my first husband was unfaithful, before meeting Robert. He had been there when Robert died. He had seen my weakest moments. But the woman looking at him now was not the same one he had known. I can do it, I said with a certainty coming from some deep place I didn't even know existed. I am no longer the woman I was a week ago. That woman died in front of that door last night. The one who remains has no patience for lies. Arthur left, and I stayed alone in my house, surrounded by silence. My phone had rung 20 more times during the day. Lucas, Chloe, even Sandra. I hadn't answered a single call. The voicemails had evolved from feigned worry to barely disguised irritation. The last one, from Chloe, said, Eleanor, I don't know what's wrong with you, but this is ridiculous. Lucas is very upset. You canceled on his birthday without even notifying us. The least you can do is give an explanation. The least I can do. What an interesting concept. For 4 years, I had done the maximum. I had given everything. I had paid for everything. I had forgiven everything. And they had taken every single thing as if it belonged to them by right, without gratitude, without love, without even basic respect. Now I was finally going to do the minimum, and the minimum was exactly nothing. That night I slept better than I had slept in years. I didn't dream. I didn't wake up at 3 a.m. thinking about what I had lost. I slept deeply, like someone sleeps who has finally made a decision they won't regret. I woke up at 6, made my coffee, sat on the terrace, and watched the sunrise over the sea. The sky was clear after the storm. Everything looked clean, fresh, new. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something akin to peace. It wasn't happiness. I was still too hurt for that. But it was something better than pain. It was resolve. It was certainty. It was knowing that I had stopped being a victim and had become someone regaining her power. Monday dawned cold and clear. I got up early, dressed in a pearl gray suit that had always made me feel professional and in control, and headed to my main office downtown. I had meetings scheduled with the managers of my 3 companies, not to talk about Lucas, but to make sure everyone was aware that he no longer had any authority or access to confidential information. In the 9 o'clock meeting, with the 5 main managers sitting around the conference table, I got straight to the point. Effective today, Lucas is no longer part of this organization in any capacity. His access to systems, his corporate email, and any privileges he had are revoked immediately. If he tries to obtain information or make requests in my name, you must contact me directly to verify. Understood. There were looks of surprise, but no one asked questions. I had been running these companies for 35 years with a steady hand. They knew that when I spoke in that tone, it was not time for questions. At 10, Arthur called me. It's done. The notices were sent this morning by certified mail. The bank confirmed that all automatic transfers are canceled. The last rent payment that went out was this month's, so they have until the end of the month before the landlord notifies them. The additional credit cards were blocked an hour ago, and the locksmith is on his way to the beach house right now. And Sandra? I asked. The eviction is in process. She will receive the formal notice tomorrow. She has 30 days to vacate, but based on the profile you gave me, she will probably try to contact you sooner. I thanked Arthur and hung up. Now all that was left was to wait. I didn't have to wait long. At 11:15, my phone exploded. Literally, messages started arriving one after another, so fast the screen wouldn't stop vibrating. Lucas, 15 messages in 2 minutes. I read them all, one by one, savoring every word of his poorly disguised desperation. Mom, what is happening? My card was declined at the supermarket. I called the bank, and they say you canceled it. It must be a mistake. Mom, answer. I received a letter from your lawyer saying I no longer work for the companies. What is he talking about? This makes no sense. What did we do to you? Chloe is crying. She says you embarrassed her in front of her friends when her card didn't work. Answer the phone. I'm coming to your house right now. We need to talk. You have to explain to me what is going on. I am your son. That last message made me smile bitterly. Now he was my son. Now that the money had stopped, suddenly he remembered the family bond. How convenient. I didn't answer a single message. Instead, I wrote one single, measured, cold message, without emotions. Do not come to my house. We have nothing to talk about. Everything you need to know is in the letters from my lawyer. Respect them. Send. Block number. I blocked Chloe's number too, although she hadn't contacted me yet. I blocked Sandra's preventively. And then, just in case, I changed my main phone number and only shared it with 5 people. Arthur, my 3 trusted managers, and my doctor. The rest of the world, including my son, was left out. An hour passed, then another. At 1 in the afternoon, I received a call from the receptionist of my office building. Mrs. Eleanor, there is a young man here who says he is your son and that he needs to see you urgently. He seems very upset. Should I let him up? No, I said firmly. And if he comes back, call security. I have left clear instructions that I do not want to be contacted by him. There was a surprised silence on the other end. Understood, ma'am. I hung up and kept working as if nothing had happened. I reviewed contracts, signed authorizations, made calls to suppliers. Life continued. The world kept turning, and it turns out I could function perfectly without having to be the personal bank of an ungrateful son. At 3 in the afternoon, when I left my last meeting of the day, I found Lucas waiting for me in the company parking lot. He had managed to enter somehow, probably convincing some employee who didn't know about the new instructions. He was standing next to my car, with his arms crossed and an expression that oscillated between fury and something that could have been mistaken for anguish if I didn't know the truth. Mom, he said when he saw me approaching. We need to talk. You can't just ignore me. I stopped 10 feet away from him, keeping my distance, clutching my purse firmly. I have nothing to talk about with you, Lucas. What? Why are you doing this? What did we do wrong? His voice sounded genuinely confused, as if he really had no idea. He was a much better actor than I thought, or he had really convinced himself of his own lie. Saturday, I said in a calm voice. I drove 6 hours in the worst storm of the year to go to your birthday. I arrived at your door at 9 at night, soaked, carrying gifts worth $80,000. I was going to ring the doorbell. I saw his face starting to change, the color draining slowly. But the door was ajar. I continued, and I heard everything. Every word, every laugh, every plan, every celebration of my future death. I heard your wife wish I would go off a curve. And I heard you laugh with her, talk about how much my beach house is worth, about how you can't wait for me to die to sell my companies and block my number to never have to see me again. The silence that followed was absolute. Lucas opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. His face went from shock to something that could have been shame if he were capable of feeling it. Mom, we were joking. His voice sounded weak, unconvincing even to himself. No, I said firmly. You weren't joking. You had precise calculations. $1,200,000 for the beach house, $3 million for the companies, $800,000 in other properties, $5 million in total. Those are not numbers you invent for a joke. Those are numbers someone investigated, calculated, planned. And the copies of keys Chloe made of my house, and the plans to empty my safe before legal proceedings start. All that requires premeditation, not humor. I saw him trying to find another excuse, another lie, another angle, but there was none. I had caught him completely. Mom, maybe you misunderstood. I misunderstood nothing. I interrupted him. I stood in front of your door for 10 minutes. I heard everything with absolute clarity. And then I left in silence, drove 6 hours back, and made decisions. Decisions that are final and irreversible. You can't do this, he said. And now fury was starting to replace the fake contrition. I am your son. You have obligations to me. My obligations to you ended when you turned 18. I replied calmly. Everything I have done since then has been of my own free will. And now that will has ended. You have a job, you have a wife, you have 2 hands, and a functional brain. Survive with that. Like the rest of the world. You're going to leave us on the street, he said, raising his voice. The rent you pay is the only thing that allows us to live where we live. Then get a cheaper apartment. Or get a better job. Or tell your wife to work full-time instead of planning how to rob her mother-in-law. Your financial problems ceased to be my responsibility the moment you decided I was worth more dead than alive. The words came out cold, hard, without a shred of doubt. And with every word, I watched him realize that something fundamental had changed, that the manipulable mother he knew no longer existed. And the beach house? He asked, now with obvious desperation. You always said someday it would be mine. I lied, I said simply. Or rather, I changed my mind. The beach house is now in an irrevocable trust. Not even I can undo that. When I die, it will go to charities that help older women who are victims of financial abuse by their families. I thought it appropriate. I saw something break in his expression. It wasn't confusion or shame anymore. It was pure rage. You are a bitter old woman, he spat. You always were. Dad used to tell me. He said you were controlling, that you used money to manipulate people, that you were never capable of truly loving. Those words should have hurt. Lucas probably hoped they would hurt, but curiously, I felt nothing. If that is what you need to believe to justify your behavior, I said, go ahead. But the truth is your father never said that. Your father loved me until his last breath, and I loved him. And I loved you more than you ever deserved. But that love ran out. It ran out in front of your door Saturday night. I walked around his car, unlocked mine with the remote, and got in. He banged on my window. We haven't finished talking, he shouted. I rolled down the window just a few inches. Yes, we have finished. Talking, relating, everything. If you try to contact me again, if you show up at my house or my office, I will call the police. If you try to enter the beach house, it will be trespassing. Arthur has very clear instructions on how to proceed. I suggest you read the letters you received carefully. I rolled up the window, started the engine, and drove out of the parking lot, leaving him standing there, mouth open, finally understanding that this time I wasn't going to cave, I wasn't going to forgive. I wasn't going to rescue them. This time was different. This time was final. The following days were a strange mix of chaos and calm. Chaos in their lives, as Arthur informed me in our daily calls. Calm in mine, a calm I hadn't experienced in years. Tuesday morning, Arthur called to inform me that Chloe had tried to contact him directly, demanding a meeting to clear up this misunderstanding. He had politely said there was nothing to clear up, that all decisions were final, and that any future communication must be in writing. She had screamed something about suing for broken promises before hanging up. "Let her try," I said calmly. "There isn't a single signed document promising them anything. Everything was always in my name. It was always my decision, and I always had the legal right to change my mind." Arthur laughed softly. Exactly what I told her. But they will probably try something anyway. Desperation makes people make stupid decisions. Wednesday arrived with the notice from the landlord of the apartment where they lived. That month's rent had been the last one I paid, and now they had 15 days to pay the next one, or the eviction process would begin. I knew this because Sandra, in a desperate move, managed to get my new number through someone in my office who shouldn't have given it to her, and was fired that same day. She left me a pleading voicemail. "Eleanor, please, think about what you are doing. Chloe is devastated. Lucas can't sleep. They can't pay the rent without your help. They are going to lose the apartment. Is that what you want? To leave your own son on the street?" I deleted the message without finishing it. I changed my number again. This time, only Arthur had it, with instructions to filter any necessary communication. Thursday, I went by the beach house to supervise the installation of the security cameras. The locksmith had changed all the locks on Monday, and now a technician was installing a complete surveillance system with 8 cameras covering every entrance and angle of the property. When I entered, I found evidence that Sandra had tried to use her keys the night before. There were scratch marks around the main lock, where she had obviously tried to force entry upon discovering her copies no longer worked. The newly installed cameras would capture any future attempt. While the technician worked, I walked through the house slowly, seeing every room with new eyes. This house had been my refuge for years. I had bought it with the first big success of my businesses. I had chosen every piece of furniture, every painting, every detail, and they had seen it only as merchandise, as something to turn into money as quickly as possible after my death. I opened the safe that Chloe thought I didn't know she knew about. Inside were the jewels Robert had given me during our marriage, some important documents, and an amount of emergency cash. I took everything and moved it to a safety deposit box at the bank. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of finding anything of value when they finally accepted this property would never be theirs. Before leaving, I sat on the terrace facing the sea, the same place where I had married Robert, where we had celebrated so many family dinners, where Lucas had played as a child. The memories were bittersweet. Good moments that were now contaminated by the knowledge that everything had been an act on their part. I asked myself when exactly he had stopped loving me. Had it been gradual, or had there been a specific moment? Or maybe he had never really loved me, and I had simply been too blind to see it? Friday arrived with a letter from a lawyer representing Lucas and Chloe. It was exactly what Arthur had predicted. A lawsuit for breach of promise of inheritance and maliciously created economic dependency. They argued that for 4 years I had created a situation of financial dependence, that I had verbally promised they would be my main heirs, and that withdrawing that support suddenly constituted cruelty and possibly even reverse elder abuse, where the older person uses economic power to control and punish. I read the entire lawsuit with Arthur present. When I finished, I looked at him. "Does it have any chance of succeeding?" He shook his head. "Zero. First, there is no document supporting their claims of promises. Second, you are 63 and in full possession of your mental faculties. Will 3 doctors testify if necessary? Third, you have documented proof of every voluntary payment you made, which demonstrates there was never a legal obligation. And fourth, although we won't use it unless absolutely necessary, we have your testimony of what you heard in front of their door, which establishes legitimate cause to cut ties. How long will it take to resolve?" I asked. "Probably 6 months, until a judge dismisses it. But just filing it already cost them money they apparently don't have. The lawyer representing them is third rate, Probably charged them little because he knows there is no case but wants the billable hours. It's more theater than real threat. I nodded. Then let it run its course. I am not going to reach any settlement. I am not going to negotiate. I am not going to yield an inch. Understood, said Arthur, and I perceived something akin to admiration in his voice. I think he had never seen me like this, so absolutely inflexible. The truth is, I hadn't seen myself like this either. It was as if I had discovered a version of myself that had been asleep for decades, waiting for the right moment to wake up. The weekend was the first in years I spent completely alone by choice, not by circumstance. There were no calls from Lucas asking me to visit them. There were no messages from Chloe suggesting we meet for lunch. There was no Sandra occupying my space, consuming my resources, dirtying my house. Just me, my coffee, my books, and the sound of the sea from my terrace. I read an entire novel, something I hadn't done in months. I cooked just for myself. Small portions of food I actually wanted to eat, not the elaborate meals I used to prepare when they came. I walked on the beach at sunset, barefoot in the sand, feeling the cold water on my ankles. And for the first time in 4 years, I didn't feel lonely. I felt free. Monday of the following week, Arthur informed me that Lucas and Chloe had abandoned the apartment in the middle of Sunday night, leaving it in deplorable conditions, according to the landlord. They hadn't paid the rent, hadn't given notice. They had simply packed what they could and left. The landlord was furious and talking about suing for damages and unpaid rent. "It's not your problem," Arthur reminded me when he saw my expression. "They made that decision. They are adults facing the consequences of their actions." He was right. But there was a small part of me, the part that had been a mother for 35 years, that felt a twinge. Not of guilt exactly, but of something akin to sadness. Not for what was happening to them now, but for everything that could have been if they had chosen to be different, if they had loved me instead of coveting me. That same afternoon, the security cameras at the beach house captured something interesting. Chloe, arriving in a taxi, trying to enter through the back door. When that didn't work, she tried the windows. When those didn't yield either, she went completely around the house, looking for some point of entry. The cameras captured her perfectly. Her face of frustration, her aggressive body language, even the moment she kicked the door with rage before giving up. I called Arthur immediately. "We have this recorded. Do you want to press charges for attempted trespassing?" I considered the question seriously. Part of me wanted to do it, wanted to use the full weight of the law against her. But another part, the wiser part, knew that would only prolong my connection to them. "Not for now," I said finally. "But keep the video. If they try anything else, we will use it, and send a certified letter warning her she was recorded and that the next attempt will result in criminal charges." Arthur agreed. Sometimes the threat was more powerful than the action. 3 weeks after the incident at the beach house, I received information from an unexpected source. One of the managers of my company, Victoria, asked me for a private meeting. When she entered my office, she wore an uncomfortable expression. "Mrs. Eleanor, I'm not sure if I should tell you this, but I think you have a right to know." She sat in front of me and took a deep breath. "My cousin works at a hotel downtown. She says your son and your daughter-in-law have been living there for 2 weeks. At first they paid with a credit card, but that card was declined 3 days ago. Now they have a debt of $1,200, and the manager is about to kick them out. They are trying to get money, apparently talking to people, trying to get loans." I thanked Victoria for the information. I wasn't surprised. Without my financial support, without real income of their own, their fall had been rapid and predictable. Part of me wondered if I should feel something about it. But when I searched inside myself, I only found a void where maternal love had been. I felt no joy for their suffering, but I felt no compassion either. It was like observing strangers facing problems they had created themselves. 2 days later, the hotel manager contacted me directly. He had obtained my information through Lucas, who apparently had given him my name as a guarantee that the debt would be paid. "Ma'am, your son assured me you would cover the expenses. He says there was a temporary family misunderstanding, but that you are a respectable businesswoman who honors her family's obligations." The audacity left me speechless for a moment. Even now, even after everything, he kept trying to use my name, my reputation, my money. "Sir," I said with a controlled voice, "my son is a 35-year-old adult. I have no legal obligation to his debts. He did not have my permission to use my name as a guarantee, and I will not pay a single penny of what he owes. I suggest you proceed with whatever legal actions you consider appropriate against him, not against me." There was a surprised silence on the other end. "I understand," he said finally. "Sorry to have bothered you." I hung up and immediately called Arthur to inform him. "I'm going to send a letter to that hotel and any other institution we can identify, making it absolutely clear you are not responsible for Lucas's debts. We are also going to consider actions for fraudulent use of your name." The situation worsened for them quickly. The hotel kicked them out that same night. According to Victoria, whose cousin kept informing her, they had to call Sandra to pick them up. Now the three were living in the 2-bedroom apartment of a friend of Chloe's, sleeping in sleeping bags in the living room. The lawsuit they had filed against me was dismissed at the preliminary hearing, exactly as Arthur had predicted. The judge had been clear. A child has no automatic right to their parents' wealth, and voluntary financial support can be withdrawn at any time for any reason. It was a complete victory, but the victory in court didn't stop their attempts to contact me. They changed strategy. Instead of lawsuits and demands, they started with pleas. Handwritten letters arrived at my office, somehow dodging my new filter system. The first was from Lucas. 3 pages of tight handwriting. "Mom, I know I made mistakes. Chloe and I said terrible things that night, things we didn't really mean. We were drunk, stressed, saying nonsense without thinking. We never wanted you to die. We never planned anything real. It was just stupid words, the kind of dark things people say sometimes without really meaning it. Please, you have to believe I love you. You are my mother. You can't abandon me like this. I need your help. I need your forgiveness. I need us to be a family again." I read the letter once. Then I tore it into small pieces and threw it in the trash. There wasn't a single word of real responsibility. There was no genuine understanding of what they had done. Only justifications, minimizations, and more manipulation. The next letter was from Chloe, surprisingly. "Dear Eleanor, I know I have no right to ask you for anything after everything, but I write not for me, but for Lucas. He is destroyed. He doesn't eat, barely sleeps, cries every night. The relationship with his mother was the most important thing to him, and losing it is killing him. I know I am to blame for all this. I was the one who said those horrible things. I was the one who influenced him badly. Lucas is innocent. He truly loves you. If you need to blame someone, blame me. But please, don't punish your son for my mistakes. It was clever. I had to admit it." She knew exactly which buttons to try to push. The letter of the unrepentant daughter-in-law, offering herself as a scapegoat, appealing to my maternal love. But I remembered Lucas's words perfectly. His comments about blocking my number, his cold calculations about how much my properties were worth. He was not an innocent victim. He was an enthusiastic participant. This letter also ended up in the trash. A month passed. Then another. Spring gave way to summer. I went on with my life, focusing on my companies, on my health, on rediscovering who I was without the weight of being the exploited mother. I started taking pottery classes on Tuesday afternoons, something I had always wanted to do but never had time for. I hired a personal trainer and started exercising regularly. I renewed my wardrobe, getting rid of all the clothes I had bought, thinking about what Lucas would like, what would impress Chloe. I bought clothes that I liked, vibrant colors I had never dared to wear. I cut my hair in a more modern, bolder style. When I looked in the mirror now, I saw someone different, someone stronger, someone who finally belonged to herself. One Tuesday in July, while working on a ceramic vase in my class, my phone rang. It was Victoria. "Mrs. Eleanor, I thought you would want to know. My cousin told me your son and daughter-in-law are getting divorced. Apparently they have been fighting constantly since they lost the apartment. Chloe blames him for losing access to your money. He blames her for saying the things you heard. The situation is quite ugly." I thanked her for the information and hung up. I felt something, finally. It wasn't satisfaction exactly, although there was an element of that. It was more a sense of closure. The house of cards had collapsed completely. Without my money sustaining them, without the common goal of waiting for my inheritance, there was nothing real keeping them together. Their relationship had been a business partnership disguised as a marriage, and when the business failed, the partnership dissolved. 2 weeks later, I was dining alone at an elegant restaurant on the waterfront, enjoying lobster and white wine, when I saw Sandra walk in. She was with an older man, well-dressed, laughing at something he was saying with that same fake laugh she had used with me so many times. I observed her discreetly for a few minutes. She was executing exactly the same pattern, the charming woman in distress, looking for someone with resources who could rescue her. The man seemed completely captivated. I wondered if I should warn him, but I decided no. It wasn't my responsibility to save every person from the predators of the world. He would have to learn his own lesson, as I had learned mine. I finished my dinner, paid my generous bill, leaving a 30% tip, and left the restaurant without Sandra seeing me. That night I slept deeply, without nightmares, without regrets. In August I received one last communication. A certified letter, this time from Lucas alone, without Chloe's participation. The handwriting was sloppy, the words smeared as if he had cried while writing. "Mom, this is my last attempt. Chloe left me. I lost my job because I couldn't focus. I'm living in an apartment shared with 3 strangers, sleeping on a mattress on the floor. I have nothing, and I know it's all my fault. I'm not going to lie anymore. I'm not going to justify. I did terrible things. I said unforgivable things. I thought things no son should think about his mother, and now I'm paying for everything. I'm not writing to ask you for money. I know you will never give me anything again, and I understand. I'm just writing to tell you I'm sorry. I truly am sorry, and to tell you I finally understand what I lost. I didn't lose your money. I lost my mother, and that is worth more than any inheritance. But I understood too late." The letter ended there, without asking for anything, without suggesting reconciliation, just a naked and raw apology. I read it 3 times. I searched inside myself for some reaction, some impulse to forgive, to rescue, to go back to being the mother I had always been. But I found nothing of that. What I found was something different: acceptance. Acceptance that some things, once broken, cannot be repaired, that some betrayals are too deep to forgive, and that it is okay to let go, even when it comes to your own son. I folded the letter carefully and kept it in a drawer of my desk. I didn't throw it away like the others, but I didn't answer it either. 6 months have passed since that stormy night in front of Lucas's door. 6 months since I heard the words that shattered the illusion of family I had been holding on to for years. And in these 6 months, my life has changed in ways I never imagined possible. I haven't become happy in the romantic movie sense. I haven't found a new love, nor had a magical transformation. But I have found something better. I have found myself, the woman who existed before becoming a mother, before defining herself through her relationship with a son who never valued her. I have reclaimed my space, my time, my money, and more importantly, my dignity. The beach house is just mine now. I changed the living room furniture. I painted the walls a soft coral color I always liked, but never dared to use because Lucas said it was too flashy. I adopted a dog from a shelter, an 8-year-old golden retriever named Luna, who had been abandoned by her previous family. We understand each other perfectly, she and I. We both know what it is to be discarded by those who were supposed to love us. We walk on the beach every morning, and at night she lies at my feet while I read on the terrace. It is simple company, without hidden agendas. She loves me because I feed her and treat her well, not because I have properties to inherit. My companies are thriving, without the constant distraction of family dramas, without the interruptions of calls asking for money or help. I have been able to focus completely on work. I closed an important contract with a European retail chain that is going to triple our exports. I promoted 2 of my most talented employees to management positions, bright young women who remind me of the person I was at their age. I pay them well, I treat them with respect, and they respond with loyalty and exceptional work. It is a balanced relationship, mutually beneficial, something I never had with my son. Victoria told me a month ago she saw Lucas working as a waiter at a fast food restaurant. He was thinner, older, with deep dark circles. When she asked if I wanted her to find out more details, I told her no, I don't want to know. It's not cruelty, it's self-preservation. I have learned that you can love someone for years. You can give them everything you have, and still that person can choose to betray you in the vilest way. And when that happens, you have no obligation to stay involved in their life just because you share blood. Blood family is not automatically sacred. Respect, love, loyalty, those things have to be earned and maintained. He lost that right. Chloe, I heard, moved to another city with a man she met online. Someone with money? Obviously. Sandra disappeared from the radar completely, probably found her next victim. The lawsuit they attempted remained on their legal record, which will make it harder for them to find lawyers willing to help them if they try something similar with another person. There is a poetic justice in that. Consequences don't always arrive in the dramatic way we expect, but they arrive. Slowly, silently, but they arrive. I have thought a lot about what I did wrong as a mother. Did I spoil Lucas? Did I give him too much without teaching him the value of work? Was it my need for love that created a monster? Probably there is truth in all that, but I have also come to understand that, at some point, children become adults responsible for their own decisions. Lucas chose to lie, manipulate, plan. Those were his choices, not mine. I cannot carry the guilt of his decisions forever. I did the best I could with the emotional tools I had. I wasn't perfect, but I didn't deserve what they did to me either. The letter Lucas sent remains in my desk. Sometimes I take it out and read it again. I look for some sign of genuine change, some indication that he finally understood, and maybe he understood. Maybe suffering transformed him into someone different, someone capable of real regret. But even if that is true, it doesn't change my decision. Forgiveness does not require reconciliation. I can let go of the hate without opening the door to him again. I can wish for him to find his way without being the one to guide him. That is the hardest lesson I have learned. That loving someone does not mean sacrificing yourself for them infinitely. That sometimes the bravest love is the one that sets boundaries and keeps them, even when it hurts. I turned 64 last month. I celebrated with my employees, with Arthur and his wife, with some friends from the pottery club I've been getting to know. It was an intimate dinner, full of genuine laughter, interesting conversations, people who are in my life because they want to be, not because they need something from me. There were no extravagant gifts or grand gestures, just good food, good wine, and better company. And when I returned home that night, with Luna waiting for me at the door wagging her tail, I realized that for the first time in years, I felt complete. Not for what I had, but for what I had let go. The will remains as I drafted it with Arthur. Most of my estate will go to organizations that help older women, animal shelters, educational programs for young female entrepreneurs. Lucas will receive his nominal bequest, the bare minimum to avoid a lawsuit, and not a penny more. It is enough so he cannot claim he was disinherited unjustly, but it is not remotely close to what he would have had if things had been different. If he had been the son I thought he was. If he had loved me as I loved him. But it wasn't like that, and these are the consequences of his choices. Sometimes, when I walk on the beach at sunset with Luna running ahead, chasing seagulls she's never going to catch, I think about the irony of it all. They wanted me to die so they could have my money. But by trying to speed up that process, by revealing their true intentions, they lost everything long before my death. They destroyed themselves with their own greed. I didn't have to do much, really. I just had to stop holding them up, stop rescuing them, stop allowing them to use me. Gravity did the rest. Without my money as a cushion, without my connections as a safety net, they fell fast and hard. And although I don't rejoice in their suffering, I don't feel guilty about it either. They sowed the wind and reaped the whirlwind, as the saying goes. I have learned that the loneliness I feared so much is not as terrible as I thought. In fact, there is a huge difference between being alone and feeling lonely. I was surrounded by family for years and felt deeply lonely, used, invisible, except for what I could provide. Now I am alone most of the time and I feel more accompanied than ever. I have myself. I have my integrity intact. I have my self-respect recovered, and it turns out that is enough. More than enough. It is everything. I don't know what the future holds for Lucas. I hope, sincerely, that he finds a path toward becoming a better person, that he learns from this, that he grows, that someday he is capable of genuine relationships based on real love and not material interest. But that is his journey, not mine. I already did my part. I raised him, fed him, educated him, gave him opportunities. The rest depended on him, and he chose the path he chose. Now he must live with those choices, as we all must live with ours. As for me, I keep moving forward. Each day is a little lighter than the last. The pain has become a scar, present but not bleeding. And I have discovered something surprising. Life after 60, after betrayal, after letting go of everything you thought defined your existence, can be extraordinarily good. It can be yours in a way it never was before. And that freedom, that absolute ownership of your own life, is priceless. It is worth more than any beach house, more than any company, more than all the money they coveted. It is worth everything.